When you hear China's space program, you probably picture a couple of moon rovers and a shiny new space station. A few flags, some impressive photos. That's the part they let you see. But behind those headlines is a machine so big, so deliberately built piece by piece, that most people in the West have completely missed what's actually happening up there. A launch rate that now rivals NASA, a homegrown rival to GPS, a Hubble-class telescope on the way, reusable rockets being tested right now, and a plan that does not end on the moon. It ends with permanent bases on 2 different worlds. This is not a space race, it's a takeover, and it's been quietly in motion for over 20 years. So let me show you just how big this thing has actually gotten. Start with the part nobody talks about: scale. Back in the early 2000s, China was barely a footnote up there. A handful of test launches. A program most experts wrote off as pure prestige, all show and no substance. Then something happened that almost nobody outside the industry noticed. China started launching. A lot. Dozens of orbital launches every single year, right up there with the United States at the very top of the charts. Some years they have attempted more launches than any other country on Earth. Think about that. A program everyone called a vanity project quietly became one of the busiest spacefaring operations on the planet. In under 20 years. You blinked and you missed it. So how does a program that was supposed to be all show end up this big, this fast? Because China was never building a string of headline missions. They were building infrastructure, and infrastructure compounds. Here's the first piece of it, and most people have never even heard of it. It is called Beidou. While the whole world had its eyes glued to the moon, China quietly finished something far more strategically important. Their own global navigation system. A complete independent rival to American GPS. More than 30 satellites circle the planet, giving China precise positioning anywhere on Earth without having to ask permission. Why does that matter more than any rover? Because GPS is not just for finding a coffee shop. It runs militaries, it times financial transactions, it guides missiles, ships, and aircraft. And for decades, almost everyone on Earth leaned on a system the United States ultimately controls and could, in theory, degrade or just switch off. China removed that leash entirely. Beidou is not exploration, it is independence. It is the kind of backbone you build when you are not planning to be a guest in space. You are planning to live there. Then there's the flagship you've actually heard of, Tiangong, China's space station. And the headline you usually get is, "Oh, they built a station too." That misses the whole point. China assembled a fully operational 3-module station from scratch in about 18 months. 18 months. The International Space Station took over a decade, with parts dating back to the 1990s and a few Russian sections that go all the way to the Soviet era. Tiangong is newer, smarter, and crewed non-stop. There are taikonauts living up there right now, rotating in and out, treating orbit like a place you go to work. And here's the part that should make you sit up. There's a telescope coming. It's called Exuntian, a Hubble-class observatory with a field of view hundreds of times wider, built to fly in the same orbit as Tiangong so it can dock for refueling and repairs. Hubble lasted as long as it did because astronauts could service it. Xuntian has that baked in from day one. Now, connect the dots. The International Space Station is aging. It's expensive, it's cracking in places, and it won't last forever. When it finally comes down, Tiangong might be the only permanently crewed station left in orbit. Let that sink in. China could end up owning the high ground above Earth almost by default. But orbit is just the second floor. The real ambition is the moon. And this is where people get it most wrong, because they look at China's lunar missions one at a time. A rover here, a sample returned there, cute, impressive, but scattered. They're not scattered. They're a supply chain. Watch the sequence. First, they mapped the moon from orbit, building the most detailed terrain models they'd ever had. Then they landed. Then in 2019, they did something no one had ever done. They landed on the far side, the hemisphere that never faces Earth, by parking a relay satellite out beyond the moon so signals could bounce back home. Then they went further. Sample return. In 2024, China brought back nearly 2 kilograms of rock and soil from the far side. First time in human history anyone had pulled that off. And the samples rewrote part of what we thought we knew, hinting the moon stayed volcanically active far longer than the textbooks said. Now here's the thing. Those missions weren't really about science prestige. They were about prospecting. Because the next ones go after one specific prize, and it's hiding in the darkest, coldest places on the moon. The South Pole. There are craters down there so deep that sunlight has never touched the bottom. Not in a season. Not in a century. In some cases, not in billions of years. Temperatures colder than the surface of Pluto. And inside that permanent darkness, scientists believe there's water ice. Maybe enormous amounts of it. And water on the moon isn't just water. Split it apart and you get oxygen to breathe and hydrogen for rocket fuel. Suddenly, the moon stops being a dead rock and becomes a gas station. A place where spacecraft headed for Mars or deeper could top off instead of hauling everything up out of Earth's brutal gravity. China's next missions, Chang'e 7 and Chang'e 8, are aimed straight at this. One carries a hopping robot designed to leap into those shadowed craters and hunt for the ice. The other bakes bricks out of moon dust using focused sunlight, then 3D prints structures right there on the surface. They are already testing whether moon dust bricks can survive space, mounted on the outside of Tiangong. They are not planning to visit the moon, they are planning to build on it, permanently. That's the whole point of the International Lunar Research Station, the lunar base they are developing with Russia, with talk of a nuclear reactor to power it through the 2-week lunar night. And it does not even stop there, because while all of this is happening, China is chasing reusable rockets too, running booster tests that look a lot like the Falcon 9 landings that made SpaceX famous. They are building the Long March 10, powerful enough to put astronauts on the moon before this decade is out. And they have already done something incredible at Mars, landing a rover on the very first try with a sample return mission planned that could beat the United States to it. Think about what the moon program really is in that light. It is a dress rehearsal. Every skill you need to survive on the moon, pulling resources out of the ground, building shelter, surviving radiation and freezing nights, is exactly what you will need on Mars. The moon is just the practice run. So step back and look at the whole thing at once, because this is the part that should genuinely change how you see it. Mapping, landing, far side communication, sample return, resource extraction, construction, permanent presence, and navigation, launch capacity, and crewed flight all advancing at the same time, in lockstep, each piece feeding the next. Most countries chase a single mission. They want the photo of the boot on the surface, the flag, the headline. China isn't doing that. China is assembling a system, and a system is a completely different animal because a system compounds. Each capability makes the next one cheaper and faster. That's how a program everyone laughed off as symbolic became the most complete spacefaring machine on Earth, almost without the rest of us noticing. And here's what's really at stake. Whoever builds the first permanent self-sustaining infrastructure off Earth doesn't just get bragging rights. They set the rules, the supply routes, the fuel depots, the standards everyone else has to plug into. Right now, while a lot of the world is still arguing about whether any of this is even real, China is quietly pouring the foundation. So the question isn't whether their space program is bigger than you thought. It clearly is. The real question is this: by the time the rest of the world wakes up to how big it got, will it already be too late to catch up? If this opened your eyes, subscribe and stick around, because the new space race is just getting started. And I want to hear your take. Is China already too far ahead, or is the West about to make a comeback? Drop it in the comments. I'll see you in the next one.